One of the things that the left is forgetting about as they promote the idea of abortion is not only the fact that there's that little human being developing inside of his or her mother, but there's a father too. There's a father and there's a mother. That child will be born, and that becomes more of a family. There is a force of wickedness, of evil in the world. We could call it the Sitra Achra, the other side. It manifests itself in every human being in what we call the Yetzer Hara, the negative inclination. And the negative inclination, the Yetzer Hara, is very tricky. The Yetzer Hara isn't just some kind of a crude base instinct. That's what sometimes people think it is, because we call it the Nefesh Hayunis. It's the animal soul. It's the life force. But it's actually very clever. It's very clever. It can be very persuasive. It can actually convince you that the Aveira, that the transgression against Hashem is the biggest mitzvah you could possibly do. The Yetzer Hara is great at what we call reframing. There's a concept called reframing, that you take a certain thing and you present it in a certain form, use certain jargon, use certain vocabulary. Oftentimes you tug on a person's emotions, and you can make something which is the most abominable thing seem to be the most reasonable thing in the world. On the issue of abortion, I believe that's exactly what's taken place. They like to say that there's polls out there, and the polls say that the majority of people favor abortion. That's what they say. They've reframed it in the Yetzer Hara. Remember, Yetzer Hara is represent kind of the little bit of brother Satan we have inside ourselves all the time. And who's also brother Satan? We go back to that story in Gan Eden, in the beginning of the book of Genesis and Bereshis, where it's the story of the snake, right? The snake convinces Chava that, hey, I know God said no, but actually it's good for you. It's a yes, right? And the Yetzer Hara is very tricky. And the Yetzer Hara manifests itself in all these pro-abortion arguments, which take people completely out of the realm of understanding what's really actually going on and reframes it differently. It's not women's health. It's a woman's right to choose. For years, the feminist movement has created a paradigm in which, instead of men and women being two complementary forces coming together and creating a whole, which is really the kind of one of the other themes of the story of Bereshis, of Adam and Eve, of Adam and Chava, instead they make it's an antagonistic relationship. It's an oppositional relationship. It's an opposition of power versus lack of power, which is how the left likes to frame everything, that there's one party that is the oppressor and one party that is the oppressed. That's why they have this whole intersectionality coalition. They have all these, we talk about the boxes they check. So they framed something quite a number of decades ago, and being pumped forward by the media incessantly, constantly, in whether it's in television shows or movies, the way news is reported. They've put forth the concept that women are a minority group, which actually is kind of silly because there's more women than men in the world to start with. And this minority group is oppressed by the majority group, which is the men. The men are the oppressors. The men are the ones with the power, and the women lack power, and the women are the oppressed group. And the men are oppressing the women and have taken away the women's right to choose. They've taken away their right to choose. They're taking away their autonomy over their bodies. The men want to own their bodies. Men see women as simply a sexual play toy, a source of labor to be exploited. They put it forth in many different ways. And so therefore, a woman's right to choose. Now, of course, then you put it in those kind of terms where here's this vulnerable party that's experienced oppression. She doesn't have the right to make any choices over her own health, make any choices about how her body is going to be used. Well, when you frame it like that, they make it appear like a very reasonable argument. And what it does is completely puts a smokescreen over it, entirely disguises what the issue that we're actually talking about. We're talking about a young, developing human being, what we call a baby. Well, developing little human beings called a baby, by the way. Some people, it's not just a fetus. I don't even like that term fetus. It's a developing baby. It's a developing little human being. So it's not a baby, it's not a human being, it's a fetus. Like like a person has different body parts. So there's a thing called the fetus, which is kind of an invasive thing inside a woman. If she wants it, that's okay. But maybe she doesn't want this thing. And some men are forcing her to have this thing inside her, and now has no autonomy over her own body. And she has no control over her own health decisions. So this is wrong. She has to be able to choose whether she wants to let this thing, which later will be called a baby, if she wants it, it'll be called a baby. If she doesn't want it, it'll remain a fetus, which can be disposed of. They've reframed in a certain way. And one of the issues that in our society that really harms us is what I would call niceism. In our society, because traditional religion has been eroded, people need a belief system. And the belief system that most people wish to subscribe to is what I call niceism. And what do I mean by that? You're probably familiar with the term virtue signaling, right? Virtue signaling. And in virtue signaling, people do certain things to show people how nice they are. Right? People do things so other people will like them and think that they're nice. And when the media has incessantly put out this message telling people as to what makes you a nice person, well, if you support a woman's right to abort her child, you're a nice person. That means you support women's rights. You support a woman's right to choose. So it's a very tricky thing. And when you have liberal movements in Judaism, which don't look into our traditional sources as their foundation for the quote unquote Judaism that they wish to promulgate amongst people, to which the rabbis who represent these movements wish to, when they give their sermons, when they speak, when they tell the public what they believe Judaism's position is on these issues, they don't look into the Torah. They first look at niceism. What does niceism say? And niceism, according to the media, is, once again, some of the things that I've already mentioned. And therefore, then they go backwards. They then go try to look through whatever Jewish sources they can connect with, which oftentimes isn't much, because much of what they learn is distilled stuff already distilled through the lens of their movements, not original sources. They find a foundation to therefore give credence to the positions that they've taken, not because those positions emanate from the Torah, but because those positions emanate from societal niceism. We see these rabbis of the liberal movements who promote abortion. They're basically presenting what are the conventional ideas of today's political establishment, represented by our media, who pump forth a certain message, and then they take that same message. You know what it's like? It's like taking a bagel. They think that they smear a little bit of cream cheese on it, like that's what they're putting out there, right? But let's say it's a bagel that's has bacon on it, so it's not kosher, right? Even if they put a little nice cream cheese and lox on it, it's still not kosher, right? So we're right before Rosh Hashanah right now. We're in the month of Elul. I really wanted to touch on a lot of that because we really need to do fixing. We're in the season of fixing right now, so we have to renew ourselves. And one thing that we have to always do is we have to constantly be joyous. Yivdu es Hashem b'simcha. You must serve God with joy. And we see what's going on in the world. We see all this wickedness out there. It can bring us down, especially when we see people who represent themselves as being the officiants of Judaism, and they're parading around celebrating the murder of babies, of abortion, which is absolutely unnecessary. In our day and time, we know that they'll talk about how Judaism allows abortion. That's, of course, a distortion of sources. We're talking about a dire circumstance where the mother's life is threatened. This woman will die if she goes forward with pregnancy. And so therefore, Jewish tradition allowed it to save the mother's life, but only in those dire circumstances. Otherwise, the greatest authorities have always simply just called it murder. No matter how much these liberal movement rabbis say otherwise, you can't change that reality. Rights are very important. But the Torah is more about what your obligations are. How do you operate in this world? What does it mean to be a human being? And specifically for us, what does it mean to be a Jew? From the 103rd Psalm, it says here, Kirachem ad alabanim, Recham Hashem Reov, that like a father having compassion upon his children, may God have compassion on those who fear God. It's an interesting thing to say. Just that one little line is so deep and says so much. One of the things that the left is forgetting about as they promote the idea of abortion is not only the fact that there's that little human being developing inside his or her mother, but there's a father too. There's a father and there's a mother. That child will be born and that becomes more of a family. And that's one thing that these people on the left are trying, even those who don't realize it, that's what they're trying to erode. The process of abortion actually takes the father out of the picture also. And you don't forget about that entirely. So a father also has this deep connection with the baby. And that's part of this destruction of the structure of the family that abortion and promotion of abortion creates, is it cuts the father out. He's as much a part of that baby as the mom is. He's not suffering the pains of childbirth and all that, and the pregnancy and all that. No. His job now is to make mom's life more wonderful and take care of his wife. That's why this structure was put together. It's a beautiful structure with God as the third partner. That's what the Talmud says. There's three partners in creating a baby. It's mom and dad, and it's also God. It's also Hashem. And this whole process of this abomination of abortion is to cut dad out and also cutting God out also. It takes something so beautiful as a pregnancy and a young human being growing inside that woman's body and the potential that that human being could have coming into the world. Now, we know that every birth situation is not a happy situation. We know that there's situations where we call unwanted children. There's a beautiful aspect to that also, because how many people out there, our hearts are breaking because they weren't able to have children for whatever reason. There's so many people out there that would love to accept that child and raise that child as their own. And that's the tikkun, that's the rectification, that's the repair. Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur are all about rectification and repair. We do the vidui. The vidui is the confessional prayer. We stand and we say and we bang on our hearts. And we go, It says, we have been shameful, we have been rebellious, we have betrayed God in a sense, we have stolen, we've spoken foolishness. Now, every person there has done different things throughout the whole year, but you know, we're connected together. All our souls are connected together. We're connected together with every Jew in the world, and we're connected together in a way with every human being in the world. So as long as we know that people are in this unfortunate line of action where they're aborting babies, we have to take responsibility for it also. So God bless you, Cecily, for the work you're doing and getting our organization going, and all the others who are joining together as we're trying to bring God's light to people's eyes. They see the truth and protect life. Life is so precious, and God bless you and all those who are going forward in this effort.